Alright, real quick, time for the developer commentary video for Greeds in the Waste. Now, just like Hollow Waste 1, I couldn't find a developer commentary video on Greeds in the Waste, or at the very least, not of the full game, so now I'm doing that. Back on the 1st of this month, when I recorded the Hollow Waste 1 developer commentary, I realized that I was kind of blinded by nostalgia, even though that game's technically not 2 years old yet, but still, nostalgia is the best word for it. And I was wondering if I was too harsh on Greeds in the Waste, or the opposite. Maybe I wasn't harsh enough. Well, after playing through Greeds in the Waste a few days ago, I kind of realized that I genuinely believe this game is better than Hollow Waste 1, at least from a gameplay standpoint. Now, I think the reason as to why I preferred Hollow Waste 1 to this game for the longest time was I was thinking more about the production of these two games rather than what the final product was. You see, Hollow Waste 1 is a game that everyone who was on the, I don't want to say development team, but everyone surrounding the project, the play testers, the dudes who saw the stuff being posted, was on board. Hollow Waste 1, the reception of that game was very positive. Greeds in the Waste was significantly less positive. Still positive at the start of development, but significantly less positive than Hollow Waste 1. Going more into the production thing, a lot of the assets from Hollow Waste 1 were reused or slightly altered for Greeds in the Waste. And I kind of sort of lost steam when I was making this game and stopped working on it when it got to like 90% completion. And then finished it like 4 months later. Just randomly decided, oh, I'm going to finish this and publish it. And then did it. That technically makes this the first game published under the Helldivr Games branch, which is weird to say the least, but yeah, this is technically the first Helldivr game released by Helldivr Games. Hollow Waste 2 is the first one to start and complete development under the Helldivr Games branch, which is sad considering 97 million games have started development since Helldivr Games started and were scrapped and or paused. Rise 2 is still going to be finished, but whatever. Now, yeah, essentially what I'm saying is that I think my perception of this game for the longest time was entirely dependent on, number one, how it compared to Hollow Waste 1 as opposed to itself, and number two, what it brought to the table compared to Hollow Waste 1. Hollow Waste 1 introduced a lot of new stuff to the Waste series, and this game reuses pretty much 90% of its code from Hollow Waste 1, which, like, why wouldn't it? But still. Now, I'm briefly going to explain the mechanics of this. Greed has a shotgun. The bullets and fire rate's pretty much the same as Hollow Waste 1. The difference is that, obviously, you're shooting 5 projectiles. The top two, 15 and 30. Bottom two, negative 15 and 30. Middle one, 0. Those are the degrees, whatever. It's a little off-centered, as you can see. No, it's not. The bullet's actually hitting the pointer part of my mouse. Oh yeah, by the way, the part of the mouse that, like, things actually recognize as the center is the very tip of it. I realized that when I was making FTW, and I find that weird, but yeah, the very tip of the mouse is what Game Maker considers the center of your mouse. So that's neat, I guess. Greed moves faster than Froth. I forgot if I mentioned this or not. Greed moves faster than Froth from Hollow Waste 1, and he takes he has 2 less base health. Now, jumping into Stage 1, you can see it's ice-themed. Now, unlike Hollow Waste 1, no stage in this game reuses a track. Every stage in this game, barring Stage 4, which I think doesn't have music, it's glitched. I think the audio file got corrupted at some point. But barring Stage 4, every stage in this game uses well, I guess Stage 4 technically does as well. No stage in this game repeats a music track from another stage. One track, the boss theme, is taken from Fink's fight in Hollow Waste 1, but, like, whatever. Every other stage in this game, which there's only 5 of, does not reuse a track from Hollow Waste 1, or even itself. Versus Hollow Waste 1, where 8 of the 10 levels use the base Hollow Waste 1 theme. Now, growths reuse their same sprite from Hollow Waste 1 and their same code, meaning 5 bullets. This is the Esh. The Esh, I'm pretty sure, takes 6 shots, and when it dies, it shoots a spike out of its body that damages the player and any enemies touching it. I like the idea of an enemy working as like a damage thing upon death, but I think visually it doesn't work. If the enemy exploded in like a big red thing, and then the enemies around it like made a noise or something when they got hit, I think that would have been better. But as is, it doesn't really convey what it needs to the player. Now, the Raiders use a traced version of their Hollow Waste 1 sprite, except the red is replaced with blue, and I think the orange is replaced with green. Functionally, they're the same, though, and their weapons have been altered to be sort of ice-themed, I guess. I'll talk about the wheelchair dude in a second. Gameplay-wise, the way fighting works, it technically requires less skill than Hollow Waste 1, since you can just shoot in the general direction of an enemy, and statistically, you'll do more damage to it than you would in Hollow Waste 1. But tactically, if you get very close to an enemy, you know, you're obviously going to do more damage to it than you would otherwise. So it's hard to say if this game actually requires more or less skill than Hollow Waste 1. It requires less skill to beat, probably. But if you want to speedrun it, it genuinely might require more. Don't know. Now this is the Chariot. Chariot's got like 15 health. Once you do enough damage to it, the top part breaks off. And, yeah, it only takes like 3 to 5 bullets to kill after that point, but whatever. I think the Chariot is okay mechanically. I like the concept of it. Definitely could have been done way better, but whatever. It's kind of analogous to friggin' the Bad Shooter from Hollow Waste 2. Played Hollow Waste 2, by the way. Whatever. Anyway, for whatever reason, I decided to give Yexus here a house. By the way, all of these dudes, with the exception of this thing here, are characters from Hollow Waste 1 and or other things I've made. Also Froth's up there, which is odd, but whatever. Anyway, by the way, that's Mech the Mouse. That's Yexus. I guess I'll say their names when I get to them. Stage 2, which reintroduces the Clanker, same as Hollow Waste 1. Except you can kill them way quicker. Instead of taking 25 button presses, you can do it as little as 5. For reference, that's how many shots it takes to kill a growth in Hollow Waste 1. So yeah, depending on how good you are with positioning and how close you get to the Clanker, you can kill it very quickly. So yeah, that's the main thing about Greeds in the Waste that makes it better than Hollow Waste 1 in my eyes. Number one, there's actually kind of a skill ceiling here. Hollow Waste 1 doesn't do that. You either are good or you're bad. There's no, like, getting better. There's no, like, or anything like that. In Greeds in the Waste, you can get better about positioning and how quickly you deal with enemies just because of, you know, how it works. Hollow Waste 2 doesn't do that either, but it doesn't really need to, considering enemies don't take, on average, 11 shots to kill. Which, yeah, that's the average an enemy takes in Hollow Waste 1 is 11 shots. I believe in Hollow Waste 2, it's like 6 to 7, somewhere in that range. It's like 6.5, 6.6, something like that. Flesh walls are a total non-issue in this game because you can kill them in like 2 shots if you get really close. Because, you know, they have 10 health, your gun shoots 5. If all of your projectiles connect, 2 shots, yeah. Versus Hollow Waste 1's 10. Now, this technically is a new variant of Raider, the stationary ones. Functionally, they're identical to the ranged ones, except they just don't move. So, yeah. I'm fine with these things existing, I guess. But whatever. Hollow Waste 1 kind of has those, as there's a couple melee raiders that can't move in Stage 9. I think there might be a ranged one there too, but these ones are supposed to do that. Anyway, yeah, this game's enemy roster, since so many of them are reused from Hollow Waste 1, kinda small. The only Hollow Waste 1 enemies admitted are the bosses, which I'm including Torch in that, by the way, the Curse, and the Foils. That's it. The vast majority of Hollow Waste 1's enemies return in this game. This here is an Elite Raider. It's essentially a weaker Clanker. Oh, this is the stage with the bugged music. Yeah, this is essentially just a lesser Clanker. The Elite Range Raider essentially functions as a shotgun enemy, shooting 3 projectiles, 2 of which move in randomized degrees. By randomized degrees, I mean a randomized degree greater than the middle projectile, or a randomized degree less than that of the middle projectile. Obviously, there's a maximum and a minimum that can travel, but yeah, it's not completely random is what I'm saying. I'm kind of fine with I actually do like the Elite Raiders a lot. I like all of the new enemies in Greeds in the Waste a decent amount, even some of the scrapped enemies. By the way, out of the released games, this is the one with the most amount of scrapped content, as there's several scrapped enemies and 5 scrapped levels. The base game was intended to, like, the main campaign was intended to have only 5 levels at the start of development. It's just that there were supposed to be 5 NPCs that showed up after you beat the boss, and they would each give you a new level to go to, and those new optional levels would introduce 2 new enemy types, that being the Shiver and the, what's his name, Frosthound. Now moving on to Stage 4. Stage 4 just kind of shows off all of the enemies in this game. That's kind of the purpose of this level. Anyway, the Elite Raiders, yeah, I kind of like them, and that's why they reappeared in FTW, both types. But whatever. I think mechanically they work, and I actually prefer them to their regular Raider counterparts, hence why the regular Raiders haven't shown up since Wastem. I've thought about remaking Greeds in the Waste. In fact, FTW, that weird semi-Metroidvania Waste game, started off development as a Greeds in the Waste remake. But, yeah, that didn't happen. I still think about remaking Greeds in the Waste because quite often, because, like, Hallowwaste 1 is on the verge of, like, kind of being good, I guess. If you just decreased enemy health, the game would be fine, really. Like, really, it's just the fact that every enemy just takes ages to kill. The issues with Greeds in the Waste, there's far more of them, but it's just the fact that I can beat the game without feeling exhausted by the end that makes me feel like this is a better game. Genuinely, this game feels less exhausting to play than Hallowwaste 2, even. And I think Hallowwaste 2 is the best Waste game. So, that kind of says a lot. Now we move on to Polaronkus, the boss. What you want to do with Polaronkus is position yourself directly behind him and then just start doing that. He only has one move, that Ice Wall stuff that comes from the left, and occasionally an Elite Raider will spawn, sometimes 2. Both types of Elite Raiders can spawn, by the way. Genuinely, it is more effective to just stand behind him and do this than to actually fight. Yes, I'd beat him, I think. There's no way of knowing because there's no, like, wind sound or anything. In fact, I'll go in just again to be safe, just to make sure that I beat him. I probably didn't, honestly, because like you only take like 5 or 6 hits in Greeds in the Waste before you just straight up croak. But yeah, I definitely beat him there. Anyway, so Greeds in the Waste. This game is odd, to say the least. I feel so weird about Greeds in the Waste because it just does not feel complete. Even though technically the start of this game and the end of this game, the game isn't complete, but the start of this game and the point it was supposed to end at, it has both of those and everything in between. It's just that it doesn't have any of the optional content it was supposed to have. But it has all of the mandatory content. My feelings of this game are so weird now. Like, for the longest time, this is like, I would just point at it and say, oh, that's the worst Waste game. That there's poison. Don't... But, like, it's better than Hallowwaste 1 from a gameplay standpoint. Not from production, mind you, but from a gameplay standpoint, this is not the worst Waste game. Like, at all. Which is weird to me. That's very weird to me. Anyway, so, the possibility of me making a Greeds in the Waste 2 is there. That might happen someday. Genuinely don't know. In fact, statistically, I probably will attempt to make a Greeds in the Waste 2. I don't know if it'll be finished, considering my history of terrible... I have a very, I kind of have a lack of consistency when it comes to finishing projects. And that kind of, I don't want to say that starts with Greeds in the Waste, because it doesn't. Technically, it starts with the OG Waste. It's just that I was kind of on a streak of finishing stuff, and then Greeds in the Waste 2, Greeds in the Waste 1, I guess, because the possibility of Greeds in the Waste 2 happening, is kind of the game that ruined that. That's a lie. Pillage Gang was. Pillage Gang was the game that ruined that. But whatever. That's the Takeover technically was still in production whenever Greeds in the Waste was put on hiatus, so it wasn't Takeover that caused that. But whatever.